Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this afternoon's webinar. We've got the benefit of having the wonderful Michelle Jarvis come in to speak to us about safeguarding. And having seen the slides, it looks like it's going to be a really interesting and fulfilling session. So thanks, Michelle, for taking the time to come and speak to us. Now, before I hand over to Michelle, I just wanted to drop a note out to everyone, just to remind them that the Risk Excellence Awards for 2026 is going to be open soon for nominations. So keep an eye out for that one coming across in the usual WRSM channels. And this year, the award ceremony is going to take place on the 21st of May, with a slight change to it being in the afternoon, as opposed to previous years where we've ran it into the evening to allow people to travel after the event and before. So, without any further ado, I will hand over to Michelle. Thanks, Michelle.
No worries, thank you. Okay, welcome everybody. Lovely to be here. Hopefully I'm going to take you through a few parts about safeguarding. A lot of it's about procedures and how to do it, because at the end of the day, most things people do understand about abuse and everything else. So we'll leave that one to one side. So we're going to look at a few things which will cover what is safeguarding in actual fact. What does safeguarding relate to? Always an interesting question, and it's very specific when we look at it. What safeguarding is not. This is a bit that I've learnt over the years of doing it. I first started safeguarding officially for one club, and I'll get onto that shortly, in 2020, and they had no procedures in place whatsoever. So a lot of this has come out of that learning. What is a regulated activity? You may have heard that term, and that's very specific. DBS and PVG, two terms, used to be called CRB checks, so we'll look at that as well. And what the checks do relate to, and when you can actually request one, which is a totally different situation to what most people think for some aspects of it. Role specific to safeguarding, the ones that you really should have in place. Suitability checks, which is the CRB checks as we used to call them, but what does that look like? And the employer's risk assessment for suitability as well, which is quite different, and a lot of companies do miss that one entirely. What is safeguarding and what is code of conduct, and what's the difference between them? You do need to have both aspects, and some companies don't, organisations, volunteer groups, and why you should actually have them. Investigations, I'm not going to teach anyone to suck eggs on that one at all, but just a few little hints for you. General takeaways and a few sites that will be of interest to have a look at going forwards for the future when you're looking at this. So a little bit about me. I mentioned a club, there you go. So health and safety wise, I've been doing this job since about 2020, on and off in different things, but I also do ISO management and stuff. So very process led, but that has helped me through this process, figuring out safeguarding and how to put that into organisations. Currently, I'm a club safeguarding officer for the Morgan Sports Car Club. There you go, on a race circuit somewhere. That was Thruxton for any of the petrol heads out there. And as that role envisions, I'm also a safeguarding officer for Motorsport UK. So that's what I do at the moment. In the past, I've been a care assistant for Sue Ryder Care, literally looking after people, Huntington's disease and the like. And I was a civilian instructor and an adult one officer with the Air Training Corps at 73 Huntington Squadron and 1094 Little Port DF when that was still in play. So working with 13 to 20-year-olds all the way through for that. So quite interesting backgrounds and a lot of different environments that don't always get the right aspect of what safeguarding means. So civilian instructors, that side was absolutely perfect, but we need to make sure all organisations have something in place. So what is safeguarding? So in principle, it's about preventing or reduce the likelihood of abuse and neglect from being able to occur within your scope of what you do. So if you're a social club, you've got coaches and things, it's only within your time, and it does actually extend out to social media as well, and any forums that you've got as well. But we're not covering the safety online acts or anything like that. We're just looking at the physical safeguarding here today. The other part of it is to take people out of situations that could put them at risk as well, or misconstrued of people being put at risk. So you've got to remember that it's not just issues relating adults going towards children, it's children who don't understand the difference and actually going towards adults, they might have a crush on them, something like that. So it's making sure the adults are protected as well. It goes two ways all the time. And that's what we need to also remember when we're looking at all of these things. Undertaking risk assessments to eliminate and reduce any likelihood of any of these happening within regulated activities. And we'll get that sorted out shortly. But we need to put into place different things, processes to make sure that people do get protected. And that's what it's all about, making sure that we do those risk assessments. Young person's risk assessment will get covered for a lot of this if you're in a business and you've got work experience or anything coming in, but you need to look after the adults as well from what they might do to them. Internal reporting processes, how to report to authorities. So there's different terminologies around the countryside for this. Social care, social workers sort of come into it as well. But MASH is sort of the modern term now, so multi-agency safeguarding hub. So that will be social workers, care teams, police and so forth, all working together. And it is very much a multi-agency. And when I've got a little safeguarding history crib sheet in a minute, that will demonstrate why we have to have so many agencies involved when something does get highlighted and reported to them. And understanding when to call the police or children's social care or adult social care. I forgot to put the term adults in that slide, apologies. So we need to also understand when we need to call those as well. So history of safeguarding has been going on for quite a long time. Morally, it's been there in common law for a long time with 1932 and duty of care, so looking after everybody. But it wasn't until the 80s when we started seeing safeguarding really starting to kick off and change and become more in the foreground of what people need to actually put into place. I'm not going to go through those, but that's the slide that quite simply explains that process. And as you can see there, we've got quite a lot of different agencies all looking after those different aspects. And this is why the multi-agency disciplinary teams really come in when it comes to safeguarding. So a few little examples of what safeguarding is in a day-to-day principle of things. It's having a lost child protocol in place. So if you're a supermarket, shopping centre, it's an events weekend, you're at a fair or something, there should always be lost children or lost adults protocol to make sure that people are going to be safe. And once we've identified a lost child, how we get them back to their parents as quickly as possible. Making sure that those children or adults at risk, used to be called vulnerable adults, but we're tending to call it adults at risk now, aren't left unsupervised in any of those spaces as well. And this is only within your organisational's control, not outside of that. And making sure that those supervisors or guardians are fit to undertake that role, i.e. they're not drunk or inebriated in some different manner on drugs. Make sure that they are fit to do that job. And by the time we get to the end of this, the code of conduct will make sense for more of that aspect as well for the majority of organisations. And with the lost child protocol, we need to make sure that we've got a safe place or for the adults at risk to be placed while we're locating them. So making sure that they know where to go and that they have that safety net once they are there. So like I said, missing persons protocol, really important. Separated persons as well. So they're not quite lost, but they've become separated. When we're doing these protocols, we need to figure out where we are, what we're doing. So if it's an outdoor event, is the weather bad? Is that going to cause additional problems? Could it increase the likelihood of people getting separated and the like? So we need to consider those aspects as well. When we're actually working in these situations and something comes up, we need to log the time that they arrived and be able to monitor what happened. And then when we've reunited them with their family or carers. Now, it says that after 20 minutes, if we cannot locate them, 20 minutes is quite a long time in a lost child or adult at risk protocol, then the police should really be called. You can make that shorter or longer depending on what you're doing. But 20 minutes is the sort of accepted time span for people to realise that they've lost somebody, giving them time to go and look for them themselves and then locate them. So all of these little things need to be considered. So that is what is safeguarding really, and what does it actually relate to? So we mentioned regulated activities earlier. So there's two regulated activity areas. So that's under 18s, full stop. So doesn't matter how old they are, 16 to 17, there may be slight differences at those ages, but basically they're under 18. So anybody at that age is directly in a regulated activity for clubs, working or anything else, depending on what they're doing. We need to get that sorted out. Adults and risk, so this is 18 and over, who may need community care services, mental health support, they may be disabled or different illnesses and such like. But this is the real big crux here, who also may not be able to take care of themselves and unable to protect themselves against harm or exploitation. So personal care comes into this, but also solicitors and other people who have power of attorney and such like, and we'll go on to that in a little bit. Morally, it includes everybody, but that's not a legal stance, but morally it does include everybody and adult to adult. But that's slightly different again, and that's where code of conduct separates out from safeguarding. So what safeguarding is not, as I mentioned, it doesn't officially do adult to adult. So general grievances between normal adults don't fall under safeguarding. And this is where a lot of organisations fall foul of it. We suddenly put all of those aspects under safeguarding. In reality, it's a grievance. And this is where code of conduct comes through. It doesn't relate directly to adults. That would normally come under criminal offences if it's gone above a grievance between two people within your organisation. So adults being capable of being able to think for themselves have the right to report if they want to. If adults don't report something and don't want to make an official complaint, we can't do anything about it. It's totally outside of our control. Whereas if it was a child or an adult at risk, it would be automatically because they fall under the regulated activities section. So safeguarding, like I mentioned, is not breaches of code of conduct either. That would be a grievance area. So what I always say is every organisation should have a grading system to identify what is a breach of code of conduct and when it becomes a safeguarding incident. And this is something we've learned very much in the club to isolate and separate those two areas. And we'll show you a few examples of that later. So what is a regulated activity? The majority of times you probably, for the children, you will be understanding that. For the adults, it is a bit more complex. So regulated activity is work that a barred person must not do. And a barred person, when we get onto the DBS checks, will make more sense. Criminal convictions, but only specific to children or adults at risk does it fall under? So in reality, if somebody has got an offence in the past, conviction for actual bodily harm when they were a teenager or whatever, that doesn't actually relate to children. So that doesn't mean that they're automatically barred from working with children. And this is where the risk assessment process comes in. So it's a bit complex when you start looking at it. It's not you have to have a clean sheet, you have to be appropriate. So risk assessment, all our lifeblood, is what we do every day. So it makes sense when you get there. Okay, regulated activities, reported incidents that warrant being barred. So on the barred list, you can report people as well, and we'll get onto that later. So safeguarding is quite a complex thing, and the regulations there just explain where that all comes from. And it doesn't include any activities in the normal course of family relationships or part of any personal groups in a non-commercial situation. So this is friends and family can care for somebody, and it doesn't come under a regulated activity at all. It's totally outside that scope. But volunteering for a group does come under regulated activities if they're doing these activities at the time. Seems a bit complex, but to make that easier, foster care is a regulated activity, working directly with children, supervision of children, so nurseries, teachers, and the like, driving children, so this is taxi drivers as well, web moderator for children's sites, websites, very key aspect there, and been in the news a lot lately, so more people are aware of that. But that is a very key aspect now. Childminding and general health care and personal care providers. So personal care, very specific term as well. So when it comes to adults and risk, it changes slightly. So healthcare professionals, exactly the same, personal care providing the same, drivers and social workers. But it also changes a little and incorporates the solicitors and everybody else at this point. If somebody manages cash, looking after bills, shopping for an adult as well, that requires that level of supervision and care. So this is where it gets a little bit more in depth when it gets to the adults as well. So examples of this, like I said, solicitors, lasting power of attorneys, who can create them, enduring power of attorney, same thing these days. That's a little bit of an old term, but they still exist. Court protection, if you're dealing with any of those, it comes under regulated activities. Decisions on behalf of the adult, independent mental health, advocate, supporting people. So this is adults at risk, not children. Children are their own entity, and that would always be a given at this point. But when it comes to adults, they have to lose mental capacity to be able to come under that. And that's quite a key aspect here. So DBS and PVG, two terms that we hear quite often. So DBS was formerly known as CRB, or Criminal Record Bureau Check. Now it's Disclosure and Barring Service. And this is for England, Wales and Northern Ireland. PVG, Protecting Vulnerable Groups, is for Scotland, and that's managed by Disclosure Scotland. They are two systems. When it comes to Scotland, if you go for the check that you live in that area for. That's where your principal check comes from, if you require to do this because you're under a regulated activity. But if you are from the UK, Northern Ireland or Wales, and you regularly go to Scotland, you also need to go and register with PVG if it's more than a day, a month type thing. So it has to, but it's a regular aspect of your role. So you need to do that. And the one thing that a lot of people and small organisations don't realising is that DBS and PVG are free of charge for volunteer roles. So you only have to pay for them if it's a company and it's part of your remit your staff are being paid. So if it's a volunteer role, like mine with Motorsport UK and the Morgan Sports Car Club, I don't have to pay for anything, and the organisations don't, because it is a volunteer role. So what are the levels for the checks? There are various levels, which also gets a little bit confusing. So the basic check is for anybody in the UK, and all this does is check the police national computer to see if you've got any current convictions, and unspent convictions, so that would still be current. And it doesn't look for anything else at all. People that might need this would be people handling cash for different companies and such like, who might be in a slight position of trust, alcohol license, personal licenses and things like that. I don't deal with these generally because it's not for the safeguarding level, but knowing that they exist is quite useful. Then we get into standard disclosure, and this is for anybody working in regulated premises or regulated environments, but they don't have direct access to children's or adults at risk. So it could be maintenance staff working in a school, such like, or engineers coming in, catering staff. So they're not directly looking after anybody, but they're working in that environment. Barristers, yeah, legal profession again. Security industry, so all security guards with the SIA cards aren't allowed to have any criminal convictions to take that role on, so that is where the standard disclosure comes from. They would have to go to another level if they were for doing anything face to face, but they're not, because they are just security guards. So this is where it sort of moves on. And then for safeguarding, this is when we get to the enhanced disclosure. And this is where we look at the barred list as well. So that's on the next slide. But for the enhanced disclosure, you have to have a specific job role in safeguarding for this one. And it is obviously for children and adults at risk. And it's typically for anyone that comes into contact with either of those once a week or more than 4 days in every 30-day period or overnight. So it's quite a specific aspect again. And when you put that with the adults at risk, it really does limit when you can request that. So who provides these for any of this? It's who provides any form of care, supervision, treatment, therapy again. And again, this is where moderators for children websites also come in. And as it's for children, they would be having a check under the children barred list as well. So there are 2 barred lists on any DBS, and I'll show you a certificate in a minute. A barred list does not mean that you've necessarily been convicted of anything, but you have had enough concerns raised about you that DBS or PVG have placed you on that barred list. So anybody working in a regulated activity, if they identify somebody is not treating people well, they've passed that person on to the police, but there wasn't enough evidence or details to say that they were doing something, but to do a prosecution, but there's an evidence to say they were doing something, we just haven't got enough to prosecute. This is where the barred list comes in. So the police or the employer can then report to DBS or PVG and say, this person has done this, we require them to go on the barred list. They will then review the details at DBS or PVG, and if they're comfortable with the evidence they've been provided, they will place that person on the barred list. And that is what's the detail here of where we're looking at. And anybody that goes on the barred list is not allowed to work or volunteer in any regulated activity with the children or adults at risk group at all. It is legally not allowed, and it's hefty prison sentence and for up to 5 years and a fine if anybody does allow anybody on the barred lists to actually work or volunteer within regulated environments. So it's very serious aspects. If somebody gets put on there by mistake, or the evidence was significantly disproved after some time, people can individually go towards DBS or PVG and request that they are removed, and then they will get that again assessed by DBS and PVG to see if they need to be removed. So it's taken me ages to figure out all of this over the years. When I first came into safeguarding, it's very confusing to figure out what all of these different things mean. So hopefully that's cleared it up a little bit for you. So the next slide is actually what a DBS looks like. If you've never seen one before, this is mine. So I'm quite at liberty to share it with everybody. And it's quite useful to see what it is. So you've got the different aspects on here. So the first one is police records check. So this is the PNC, Police National Computer, cautions, reprimands and warnings. So it would state everything in there if necessary. Information held under Education Act as well. Any details would come into there. And then we get on to the children's barred list and the adults barred list. And if it was requested, as you can see here on mine, the not requested is under the adults barred list, because the area that I volunteer in is children. I'm not dealing with adults at risk, remembering that would be, I would have to give them personal care. So, or support. That doesn't happen here. So I can't have the DBS adults barred list actually requested or carried out there. So just to make sense of that one. And then at the bottom is Chief Police Officer's discretions. So if none of the items, so if, like I mentioned earlier, if you had concerns with someone and you tried to put them on the barred list, but the DBS didn't appreciate that, they didn't quite tick the boxes to say, yes, they should go on the barred list, it can then go down to the Chief Police Officer's discretion to put the same note on there, but under Chief Police Officer's discretion section. So the details can still be on there. That person would still be technically allowed to work with children or adults, depending on where it was, but you have to do your risk assessment to ascertain, do you want them there? So hopefully that's a little bit clearer. At the top of the document, you can see position applied for, name of employer, and the organisation that actually did the check for you. So that's one nice certificate that it's very difficult to see until you've got one, if you've never seen one before. So when can we request one? I think we've pretty much answered this already over the time that we've been going through this. So when you're doing regulated activity with children, so anybody under the age of 18, remember those time spans as well, 4 days in every 30 days to work with them. And that's for both adults or children. And then, of course, adults at risk in regulated activities. So that's 18 or over, that through different things will be requiring personal care or significant care to them to support them. And don't forget, if somebody's in a position of trust, this is becoming more of a known name now, so, or position, and people like treasurers and things like that would come under that, or company directors, or the board team would be in positions of trust because they're senior and they have authority. So some companies will do this at any given point for any of their people because it's their protocol too. So you've got to look at those aspects as well. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense to everybody. So moving on, so roles relating to safeguarding, and these, the one thing, the role that you should have is an appointed safeguarding officer. So they don't have to do much. Sometimes it's not much of their job. It's just the person to go to, a bit like a mental health first aider. They don't generally do a lot, but they're there for people that might need them. So they are to be the first point of contact and lead for all reports that are coming in. Preferably have more than one to cover holiday and sick. And also sometimes if you are in a higher risk area and there's a lot of issues coming in, sometimes it's nice to actually have more support in that. Now, they will liaise with police and local authorities and the MASH groups if a safeguarding incident has actually been reported and it's gone to them to deal with. Undertake internal investigations of relating to concerns. So even if a concern is being dealt with by other authorities, you still might want to carry out your own investigation at the time, just to have some idea of what's going on so you can start putting better controls in place. Implement suitability checks, so that's the DBS checks and the risk assessment. Undertake the risk assessments as well. For other staff, so persons of trust are the key aspects here. So anybody within that sort of job area, they have authority within the organisation, volunteer group or whatever. Be trained on how to report and act when safeguarding is a concern, and also to act properly within those. And undergo their own suitability checks if necessary, depending on what they're doing and what their role is. But that all comes down to the employer's risk assessment. So after we've highlighted or figured out that somebody does require a DBS or PVG, when you receive those, so the employer will receive a copy of the DBS, PVG records as well as the individual themselves. You both get copies. Employers must undertake the risk assessment to make sure that that person is suitable for the environments that they are in. Making sure everything is looked after and covered, basically. So volunteers and paid employees all come under this. It does not matter. The risk assessment part is the most common part I find that companies have missed entirely. Their general comment is, in some situations, including some schools, well, they came back clear, so they're okay. It's like, but have you done a risk assessment just to say you've looked at this? No, why should I? We still need to go through the protocols. And when explaining that they might have had something in the past, it's like, well, nobody will have. And it's like, I don't believe that for an instance. You will always get people with some issue on their records at some point. And just remember, because somebody's criminal record doesn't have a criminal record doesn't mean that, sorry, I'll start again. Just because somebody has a criminal record does not mean they're unsuitable for a caring role. That is the key aspect here. So what does a risk assessment sort of look like? So this is the one that I have for my simple companies and small to medium enterprises, because it's about as much as we need to do for the majority of them. So date, name, employee's name, and brief description of role and where they're working. And that's what we're looking for here. So will they be working directly with anybody? If the answer is no, we move on to the next section. What environments are they going to be working in? So again, we've looked at that. What DBS level is required? So we would do this before we send the records off, the DBS or PVG records to be done. When we get that back, obviously we write the certificate number down and the completion date, and then we need to just review those. Are any comments stated? Does it involve working with vulnerable persons? We've turned that into vulnerable persons to save writing children and adults at risk each time. Does the employee pose an obvious risk to those people? And is the employee suitable for work in the environments that have stated above as well? If that's all fine, we sign off and we approve them. It could be that you've got somebody that's had some discretions in the past. As mentioned, you might just want to put previous convictions not related to children or adult at risk, okay to approve. and that's all you need to put in there at that point. So this is the form that you can share with people, because it's not anything directly specific, if somebody does ask. So having all of that done, like I mentioned, we've got very different aspects here. So we've got regulated activities, and then we have everybody else on the moral ground. So with the clubs and the companies that I work with, making sure that we have a good framework that everybody can adhere to is key for all of this, and being able to do an investigation as well for anything. So principally, this is where I swap slightly more to adult working and normal companies. So having a general code of conduct for staff, volunteers, and what you expect of them is a key aspect to have for any organisation. Doesn't matter how large or small, this really is a key document to have. It's sometimes covered in contracts of employment, but it's not specifically generally for codes of conduct on how people should act in any given situation. But we need to also cover any infringements of code of conduct as well. So disciplinary action, grievances, inappropriate behaviour for adult to adult. And that's a large aspect to where we sort of end up sitting. Safeguarding is on actual abuse, multi and consistent inappropriate behaviour cases, and police and authorities would lead on that investigation. So this is where we're separating code of conduct out with safeguarding. But you do need to understand the different levels. Now with Motorsport UK, the last slide I have got a link for their website on safeguarding. It's free to public access documents, and it's really good area for you to look at. We'll get to that very soon. I got my slides slightly in the wrong order in my head there. So code of conduct, when you are writing a code of conduct, please make sure that you draft it properly. So the old question is, are they legally blinding? And it depends on how you write them and how you enforce them within the company or organisation. So you need to state if any violations to the code happens, the disciplinary action will result. And then you can state within HR procedures or disciplinary action will contain, and we can remove you from post or anything like that, depending on what you've got in the background. And if you actually enforce that, it is legally binding going forward. Code of conduct is more prescriptive and contains more specific rules and behaviours and actions, so further than your employment contract. And having a code, like I said, is so important for all organisation, regardless of size and what you're doing. Please have one in place, as it does ensure that employees are aware of what is expected of them and how they should behave. And if they do keep causing you problems, you have then the ability to discipline them afterwards on that. And as we keep saying, all of this counts for voluntary and paid working. It does not matter what it is. But please always state disciplinary procedure in there. It sounds like I'm banging on about it, but when you need to do something, that is the bit that will stop you if you haven't put it in there. You will just be twiddling your thumbs, going, sorry, I can't investigate. Just with normal accident investigations within the workplace, if it isn't stated within your policy documents, you can't actually do an investigation. So code of conduct infringements, like I said, this is Motorsport UK. They have safeguarding and they have race with respect, which two separate things. And this is race with respect. So this is how to look at it in a more sensible, everyday aspect. So they have level 1, amber, yellow. So it was a simple concern. In motorsport, a lot of people get irate and angry. It's an adrenaline environment, so sometimes something might happen and people will get angry at each other. That's quite a common issue, or at a decision by an official. So number 1 is really that aspect going through here. So the language and gestures may be offensive, but typically it's just that instant, it's not ongoing. And people will have, somebody will speak to them, a report will be made, calm the situation down. And that is all that gets done at this point. For level 2, slightly increased issues, repeated behaviour, and this is where it's changing, which isn't in line with code of conduct. So this is where the breaches start coming in. Threatening or intimidating behaviour, discrimination, just starting to brew up here, but it might just be a few times. It's not the first time with a level 1, it's just starting to become a habit. So then again, this is a local level issue that we deal with. Level 3, this is where it's getting lots of people are being affected by this. It really is repeated transgressions, and it's getting very offensive to people. And again, this one is at suspension level. So as you can see, it's going up the grades. But if any of this was related to specifically children or adults at risk, it would automatically go into a full safeguarding. This bit, the levels of concern here for race respect is adult to adult. So this is the difference. And having that escalation procedure is quite key as well. So investigations, I'm not going to teach most of you how to do an investigation out there at all. But from practice and having to put all of this in place, make sure that you follow your own organisation's protocol. You are dealing with a lot of aspects. It's not just the HSE here, it is the police, social care, and everybody else, and all the different agencies that are involved. So you've got to be even higher on your game when you're doing these investigations. Investigation team, lead investigator as always, but I always like working with 2 other people. Typically, they would be a board level and then somebody else to support as well. But you need that authority at different groups. So all of these people will see all of the documents. But when it comes to safeguarding, you have to safeguard the investigators as well. If you're going down that line, because sometimes it can be very disturbing of what you're finding. Even if it's adult to adult, it's not particularly nice sometimes. But if at any point you discover there were criminal offences, even for adult to adult, straight over to safeguarding, the police and all the teams for that. If it's children or adults at risk, it would go straight over to the police and the safeguarding teams automatically, and you would just be doing your own internal investigation at the background here. But please always give yourself time. People need to calm down after events have occurred as well, and then be able to digest the information properly and take the statements and everything. So time is key here. So a little takeaway of what we're doing. So out of all of that, my key aspects is have a code of conduct for your organisation, train everybody on the basics of that code of conduct as well. Inform employees and volunteers that work in regulated environments about possible signs of abuse and neglect. Appoint a safeguarding officer, preferably 2, but appoint a safeguarding officer. Undertake suitability checks for anybody who works in regulated activities or in positions of trust. Ensure you have an open door policy for everybody. But if in doubt, you call the police or the local children's social care, social services or the like, but call the police. They're the ones that initiate the total aspect of this. And if you've got those in place, the rest of it falls in quite nicely. So a few little bits here. I've picked Cambridge and Peterborough Integrated Care Scheme for their safeguarding team because it's my local one. It's easier for me to pick that up, but have a look at each of your council aspects for that. DBS and PVG, they're the main government websites, and that will lead down to how to get the rest of it. And as I mentioned, Motorsport UK, it's all public access documents for safeguarding, but it's a really good environment because they're looking after everybody from children to adults at risk to everybody in the middle. So their documentation covers the vast majority of situations for that. And that is the end of my webinar or my presentation. Hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll be taking some questions. I see a few have turned up here already. So there we go.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, a few questions on here. Really good set of slides and presentation. I think for me, I've taken some notes away with me as well from the volunteering I do in my local rugby club. So, very interesting. So the first question we've got is, do DBS and Disclosure Scotland have access to each other's data?
No. No, that's why you need to register them if you're working cross-border. You have to have one in both sides, which, as always, government bodies aren't officially allowed to share within themselves, so you have to apply each time. So that's always an absolute nightmare. Next question. I'm reading these, sorry, I'm taking over your role there, Jonathan. How long are DBS and PVG valid for? Typically, we do them every 3 years, but now both systems are turning electronic, so it's constant. You now register on a database, and anybody can review that at any time. It updates much more regularly. So the electronic systems are coming in much better now. So once you've got your certificate, you can then go and register with that. It's a nominal fee to get registered on there, but it does stay current. So the traditional paper copy is the free one for volunteers. And then the registration is, I think it was £18 when I last registered on that. And that stays current then. At what point should a sports club or other community group look to have an employed safeguarding officer instead of relying on a volunteer? Depends on how big the group is. So this is a good one for Motorsport UK. They have a team of 4 based across the whole of the UK and for doing all of their motorsport aspects. The rest of the safeguarding officers, like myself, are purely volunteers at a local level, which is the same for everything. But you're looking at the whole Motorsport UK in the UK for that. Depends on the size. If you've got hundreds of thousands of people, then yes, I would suggest you have full-time health safeguarding involved. But that's very much down to budget and what you can manage. But like I say, have a chat with Motorsport UK because they are really key for discovering that. And I've worked with them very closely and they're a good team. So hopefully that might give you some ideas. Yeah, that one. And do others provide a contracted safeguarding officer service? You have to be within the group, within the volunteers. You possibly can get a memorandum of understanding across groups. Just think of a normal work environment. So between police, HSE and everybody else, we have memorandums of understanding on how we work. So you can potentially cross-reference that. So you might have several groups in your area and you put your own mini little group together to say, this is the person that's going to look after all of these, which might be a more viable option for some groups to have. So yeah, that is a possibility, looking at all of it. Yeah. That seems to be all the questions. I must have covered everything quite well. That's scary.
I think so, yeah, no, and with a few minutes to spare, and I think I would throw it out.
Jonathan, sorry, there's one in the Q&A. What are the legal implications of being a volunteer safeguarding officer should something go wrong?
So that's luckily because I'm under Motorsport UK, so I'm governed by and insured by them. So you should come under the club's insurance policy for a role. So it might be worth actually having a chat with the brokers, whoever have done the insurance for the club. hopefully your club's got some level of third party insurance cover for all of the people doing the roles. When it comes to volunteers, it's just like, as long as you're proving that you're doing as much work and control as possible, that's fine. And the majority of the time, if you're not sure, you phone the police up and the local social services, and they will take you through it as well. So for real small groups, the majority of the time, you are just the point of receiving the call to make the decision to call the authorities in at that point. But it's a lot of the time you will just be dealing with lost child or lost adult and just making sure people are looking after each other. So it's not quite as scary as it seems. It's like any role. It's like even volunteering as a health and safety advisor for an organisation. It's where do you come in at this point? But hopefully that's answered a little bit.
I've got a final question here, and it's back to fairly on in your slide pack, which was saying that safeguarding in general often looks at the young person more so than the adults on the other side of that.
Yes.
Or servicing and that sort of thing. But what kind of control measures are there, or safeguards that are put in place that
For
safeguard?
those situations.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a good one to look at within the cadets. So I think the relationships turned out a little bit more. So you're not allowed to travel in a car by yourself with somebody that you're caring for. So we'll do it, cadets. So one adult can't have one child in the car traveling somewhere with them. You should have two adults at all times with the group. If it's an overnight, it's one adult per every 4 children in open tent situation or anything like that. So, but you basically make sure adults aren't put in an issue area by themselves. So always make sure there's generally 2 of you. If you are doing work experience, for instance, if you're having a meeting with a child, make sure it's in a glass-fronted meeting room so other people can see you. It's not hidden out of the way. So having these little minor safeguarding preventions do make a big key difference to everybody. And making sure that the adults, if they are concerned that the child, which isn't uncommon, might end up with a crush or something on you, which if you're being nice to somebody does commonly happen at different ages, is that adult can feel non-ashamed by saying, I think I've got an issue, can we change to somebody else, or can I have somebody else in there? So it's making the adults aware of watching what's happening coming back as well. Because you don't want to put yourself in that position of being a situation being misconstrued. And if that does happen, then also you need to have the ability to speak openly with the guardians and the parents of that child specifically as well, and go, look, they seem to have a crush, and be open as soon as that turns up so we can change and manage it. So it's about being open and transparent at all points for this. So hopefully that explains that one a little bit more.
No, it's not big lavish, expensive control measures. It's
No.
it's a planning and forethought.
Yes. Yeah.
Goes a long way, I think, from some of the control measures that you've gone off there, and yeah, I think that answers it for me.
Yeah, so safeguarding is very simple. If you get all those little bits right to start off with, it's easy. It seems like a lot to start off with, but having just the simple little protocols in place will make everything a lot easier. And if you do a lot of work experience in your organisation and stuff, and having the people that do quite a lot of that support, basically trained of, yeah, don't do this, don't be nice, don't do any physical touching, all of those little tiny bits. But if they're about to fall over, be nice, catch them. It's one of those understanding of how far we can go in any different situation, and different ages, especially with child development, does change that protocol. So a teenager you'll treat very differently to a 4-year-old. So you've got to look at that as well.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Well, look, thanks, Michelle. I think we've got we haven't had any other questions come in on the chat or on the Q&A. We will look to draw it to a close if there is nothing else to come in. Julie, don't know if there's anything last minute from yourself.
No, just to say that the recording will be on the RSM member resource hub when I've got a minute to upload it. Thank you.
Brilliant. And I think we've got a last final message from Sarah, just to say thank you so much, Michelle, for the presentation. So brilliant. Right, well, look, we'll draw it to a close. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.
Take care. Thank you.